Hello everyone, this is Jenny, your lead instructor from Bellviso Global Aesthetics. Today I'm going to take you through a powder brow procedure from start to finish. To begin, I have my client Lena fill out her consultation form. We discuss her brow goals, desired shape and color, and what skin type she has. Lena has very sensitive skin, is prone to scarring, and has very oily skin, so powder brow is the best PMU procedure for her. Prior to the service, I take before videos and pictures. Make sure you have a clean camera lens and good lighting. I'm really focusing on the brows, keeping my camera angle parallel to her face or slightly tipped forward for a more flattering angle. Before I clean up the brows, I use an alcohol pad to disinfect the area. Now, if she had makeup on her eyebrows, I would either use a baby wipe, micellar water, or makeup remover first, and then I would use an alcohol pad to disinfect the area. Now that her brows are clean, we're ready to begin shaping her brows. To groom my client's brows, I use tweezers, razors, and scissors. The razors are great for removing peach fuzz and an excessive amount of hair. I don't want my client to have a painful experience, so I use those mostly. I'll use the tweezers to really define and carve out the shape, and the scissors to cut excessively long eyebrow hair. Now that I have Lena's brows groomed and shaped, we're ready to begin mapping. First, I'm going to make the center line or her zero line from the middle of her bridge of the nose, gently pulling it up through her forehead. Secondly, I'm going to find the beginning of her brow using her nose ring area, pulling straight up. Keeping my finger placed on her nose, I'm going to find her arch or her B line. Afterwards, she's going to look up high to the ceiling, find underneath her last lash, and pull gently, finding the tail placement. Repeat the same step on the other side, finding the beginning, your A, the arch, the B, the tail, the C. So you should have 7 vertical lines. Next, we will make our horizontal measurements, the vertical thickness, as well as her B to B line or her arch to arch. Once I have all of my measurements, my 7 vertical, my 3 horizontal lines, it is now time to measure. It is crucial that the 0 to A measurements are equal on both sides. Now this number is unique to everyone, but I have to make sure that 0 to A on both sides are equal. From A to B, the beginning of the brow, to the arch should be a measurement of 3 centimeters to 3.5 centimeters. The arch to tail measurements, B to C, should be either 2 to 2.5 centimeters. After I've measured both brows and they're perfectly symmetrical, it is now time to create our shape. I will begin creating the brow from the bottom, and then I will secure the brow from the top. You want to make sure that your wax pencil is really thin so it creates thin lines. After I've carved out my brow, I will further thin out my lines using a precision Q-tip. This ensures that my shape is super thin. After I'm done creating my shape, I will show my client her brow in a mirror. Here, she'll tell me what she likes or what she doesn't like or what adjustments need to be made. Here, Lena wanted her tail a little lifted and a little bit shorter. After I made those adjustments, I repeated the same step and the same process on the other side. I will then take Lena to a larger mirror so we can further inspect the brows. I will also step away from Lena to neutralize my own eyes and come back. We want to make sure that your client loves the shape, and after those adjustments, she was in love. We are now ready to begin the service. Before we start, I am going to have Lena wear a hairnet. and making sure that the hairnet is really into her hairline so it don't create an ugly indentation on her forehead. I'm also securing my shape even more with my wax pencil. The first step in creating a powder brow is securing our outline that we made with our wax pencil. I'm going to be using a 1RL. I'm going to have my needle hang to approximately 2.5 millimeters, and then I will be outlining from the tail to the front and the bottom first. I'm going to slowly whip shade a soft powdery outline, but you can also use an etching pendulum motion where you keep the needle in the skin the entire time. When you use the etching technique, it does create a more defined outline, but Lena likes a softer outline which looks more natural. Either one is correct, just find what is most suitable for your client. Once I've secured the bottom, I am now going to secure the top of the shape. This time, I'm going to go from the tail, the arch, and only 3/4 of the way on the front. You do not want to outline the top of the brow 100%. You should not have two parallel lines. One line, the line on the bottom, is the longest, and then your outline in the top is slightly shorter. Once I've secured my outline, I'm ready to begin shading. I'm going to dial down my needle. So instead of my needle hang being 2.5 millimeters, it will now be 2 millimeters. 2 millimeters is approximately the thickness of a dime lying on its side. When I outline, I'm moving incredibly slow, but for shading, I'm moving a little bit faster. For my outlining, I was approximately 5 volts, and for shading, I'm at 5.5. You can move a little bit faster, but you never want to shade more than 7 volts. You'll always want to begin your shading from the tail towards your fronts. I'm going to be using the wall-to-wall method, securing the shape from the bottom, middle, top, and going down from the top, middle, bottom, and then moving down the brow, always overlapping 50 to 70%, just like we do for outlining. I'm going to shade from the tail to the arch, put my machine on a pause, and check to see if I have implanted enough ink. You want to see soft pixels, and I'm going to be using a precision Q-tip to draw down the brow to see if I have enough ink. I didn't find that I had enough saturation, so I went back over the same area, slowly moving, not too fast. I need to do the same thing throughout the entire brow. I will move section by section. So now that I did the tail to the arch, I'm going to be doing the arch to the front of the brow. Again, I am slowly whip shading, securing the bottom, middle, top. I have already checked my ink implantation and I'm satisfied with the saturation. So here I am applying some numb using a lipstick applicator brush. It's really soft on the skin. Once I have the numb, I will also put a pigment mask, and then afterwards I will occlude the brow using our saran wrap. I'm going to leave the numb and pigment mask soak for approximately 2 minutes. You do not want to over numb the brow because the skin becomes very hard and rubbery. I'm going to take green soap with a cotton pad. I'm going to saturate the cotton pad from edge to edge. You do not want any dry areas on the cotton pad because then it will feel like a rug burn. Once you have your cotton pad nice and saturated, you're gently going to press it on the client's brow. This should feel very soothing and cooling. If it should ever sting, that means you have too much soap in your mixture. After removing the numb, I'm just going to put pigment on the brow. The brow will soak in the pigment while I repeat the same process on the other side. Make sure you occlude the brow with saran wrap. Now that I'm finished with my right brow, I'm going to be moving on to the other side. I'm going to be repeating the same process, so outlining the bottom and outlining the top 3/4 of the way. For this side, I like to whip shade away from myself, from the tail up into the arch, and then I switch and I whip shade towards myself from the arch to the tail. There's a couple of different methods to outlining. Sometimes you can outline the bottom first and then the top, but on this side, I chose to outline the tail section. So I whip shaded away from the tail up to the arch, and then I went towards myself from the arch to the tail. On the top part of the tail, I went from a whip shading away from myself to a whip shading towards myself. Both methods are fine. When outlining and shading a powder brow, you're going to be using a two-way stretch. So as you can see here, my finger is pulling her skin from the middle of her nose, and my thumb is pulling her tail down. You want to make sure you have a very tight stretch. If you don't have a good enough stretch, your ink won't implant as well. Once I've secured my outline, it is now time to begin shading. On the other side, I shaded from the tail to the arch to the fronts, but for this side, I'm going to be shading from the arch area or close to the arch area down towards the tail. Either one is correct. Because I am right-handed and I'm working on the other side, I find this more comfortable. So again, I started a little bit away from the tail, doing whip shading towards myself, and then I switched it up, whip shading away from myself. I'm going to shade the tail, the arch, and a little bit past the arch, and then I'm going to stop and check to see if I have enough ink implantation. I'm going to be using a lipstick applicator with a little bit of numb and draw down or draw up. I'm pretty happy with the implantation, but I want to be a little bit more specific. So this time I'm going to take a cotton pad with some green soap and wipe it down. I'm pretty happy, but I feel like I had a couple of pockets, so I'm going to go over the tail section again, but just moving a little bit slower than before. Once I'm happy with my saturation in the tail, I'm going to be moving from the tail to the arch to the front of the brow, securing the shape from the bottom, middle, top, top, middle, bottom. Once I've completed that process, I'm going to be adding my numb and pigment soak and covering the area for only 2 minutes. To help remove the pigment that has hardened on the other side, I'm taking some hustle butter and slowly massaging it in the brow. This helps break down the dried pigment as well as moisturize the skin. You do not want to be shading on hardened, dry skin. You have a probability of ripping the skin, and the skin can also get clogged into your needle. After I've done a hustle butter mask and moisturize, I take my green soap on a cotton pad and wipe it off. I'm now going to be removing the numb and pigment off of the other brow using my Hustle Butter and Green soap. Once I've wiped off the brow and I comb up the hairs, I'm going to be securing my border or my shape again with my wax pencil. I do this lying down, however, I'm going to check the shape having her sitting up because we want to be working with gravity, not against. I will repeat the same mapping process with my wax pencil on each side, and I will also redraw my A lines because I want to make sure that the brows are coming center evenly, not having one coming in too close. For powder brows, we want to make sure we have very soft fronts. However, when I did my first pass of shading on Lena, I was too soft. So as opposed to starting right off on my second pass, I'm going to redefine and re-implant ink in her fronts. Very softly, I'm going to go from the bottom to the middle to the top, top, middle, bottom, and a very small section, and wipe to see how I did. Because I already have my first pass of shading and I've secured my shape, I can put my thumb in the middle of her brow to get a really nice pull in the front to make sure I can get good, even distribution of pigment. I'm going to repeat the same process on the other side. I'm putting my finger in the middle of her brow and really having a pinpoint stretch in that front. It is very common to have a client that has one side that's more sensitive than the other. Lena has very sensitive skin, and like we talked about in her consultation form, is very prone to scarring and keloids. My pressure is very light, however, her one side is still a bit more sensitive. When I was doing this front, she was telling me that her fronts were very sore, and I could tell that her skin was more sensitive because she had a bit more pinpoint bleeding. Now that I'm satisfied with my fronts on both sides, I'm going to be completing my second pass of shading. While I am doing my second pass of shading on this side, I'm going to put a numb and pigment soak on the sensitive fronts, but I'm only going to be doing it for 2 minutes. I will be doing my second pass of shading starting from the tail all the way to the front using the whip shading towards myself method. However, I do incorporate some cross hatching, meaning that I'm going to be moving upwards and diagonally. However, you never want to be going downwards diagonally, always up with the grain of the hair. So again, I'm shading towards myself and then I will be whipping diagonally, going from the bottom up to the top. This creates a nice soft blend, especially for the fronts and having a more pixelated tops. After I've completed my second pass, I will put a pigment and numb soak and occlude the brow for only 2 minutes. So you want to make sure you may have a clock nearby because you don't want to be touching your phone and spreading any bloodborne pathogens. After I've removed the numb and pigment from the fronts with my green soap, I'm going to take some hustle butter and rehydrate the skin. I want to make sure that it's a nice slippery surface and not dry. After a little hustle butter mixture, I like to wipe it off with green soap. Here, I'm going to go in with my second pass, starting closer to the fronts. I'm doing a little bit of whip shading away, and then I'm going to be switching it up to do some whip shading towards myself. I work a little bit differently on this side because I'm right-handed, but if you feel comfortable moving to the other side of the bed and whip shading towards yourself, you're more than welcome to do that. I just find this method to be a little bit better. Again, I always start implanting ink from the bottom and then slowly moving my way up to the top from the top, middle, bottom, and I work my way down towards the tail. Once I've completed the second pass, I'm going to be adding my numb pigment and then occluding the brow with my saran wrap. And then I'm going to be checking the other side to see if I need a third pass. I will use the same saran wrap and just place on the other side. This way I'm not wasteful. Using my hustle butter, I will gently massage it into the brows, trying to break down any dried pigment. Once I've massaged that into the skin, I'll take my saturated cotton pad with green soap and take off the pigment using the same method on the other side. I'll comb the brow hairs up just to make sure that there's no dried pigment on the hairs, and then I'll sit my client up and see what areas that needs more saturation from her third pass. I always like to sit my client up because her brows do look different lying down compared to sitting up. For Lena's third pass, we're mainly concentrating on adding more color or definition from the tail to arch area, and then just a little bit more on her fronts. Her second side, which is more sensitive, is needing a little bit more of a complete third pass just because it's having some trouble taking in the ink. Remember, when you have a sensitive side, it's a little bit harder to implant that ink. So you want to make sure that you really stretch the skin, be really soft with your pressure, and try your best, but you don't want to overwork the skin. So as you see here, I'm doing more of a complete third pass, really getting that arch to tail area, and then I'll work my way towards the front. After Lena's third pass was complete, I gave her a numb and pigment soak for approximately 10 minutes. During this time, we discussed her aftercare and her touch-up. A touch-up for a powder brow will be approximately 6 to 8 weeks long. However, I err on the side of caution and have my clients come at 8 weeks. After our numb and pigment soak was finished, I sat up Lena and inspected her brows. We wanted to add a little bit more shading on the bottom of her brows, especially in the arch to tail area. We want to give her a nice definition. I gave her another numb, but as you can see here, this brow was in a lot of pain. So unfortunately, I had to quit outlining and just concentrated on the arch to tail area as much as I could. After I completed my detail pass, meaning any areas that had pockets, I again gave her a pigment and numb soak. This time, however, I'm using a silver gel to help with redness. Silver gel has some healing properties and it helps removing the redness from the brows. The silver gel can help break down the pigment that's sitting on the skin. Sometimes the hustle butter and green soap isn't enough to remove the pigment, so I'll use a Q-tip with the silver gel and I'll massage it lightly. You want to make sure that the Q-tip is clean, so there should be no pigment or blood on the Q-tip. After getting rid of the initial redness, I did put another pigment soak on because I wanted the incisions to really soak up the ink. So after I soaked the pigment for approximately another 5 minutes, I put on an additional silver gel and repeated the same process, trying to get the Q-tip as clean as possible. You'll want to take a spoolie and comb the hairs up to make sure there's no pigment resting on the eyebrows as you see here. Sometimes just wiping with the hustle butter and green soap isn't enough. After I've combed the brow hairs up, making sure there's no leftover pigment, I will then put an additional layer of silver gel on top of Lena's brows and have it soak for 5 minutes. This way, her brows will be nice and cooled down for pictures and they won't flash red. After Lena's redness went away using the silver gel, we removed it using green soap, and then I showed Lena her brows in their large mirror. She absolutely loved them and I was super pleased with the results. Her right side is a little bit more tender than the other side and it didn't take as much ink, but we know at the touch-up we will be able to make those adjustments. Make sure your before pictures and after pictures are the same. So as you see here, her before video was lying down and I made sure that the after video was lying down as well. I hope you found this powder brow tutorial helpful and informative. If you have any additional questions, feel free to drop a comment below or ask me questions once you come to the class. I look forward to seeing you then. Take care.